Welcome back, everyone, to the channel Confessions of the Elderly. 1 week after my brother-in-law got married, his new wife blocked the door. "Mom gave this house to me, you two need to get out." My husband laughed and replied, "I've sold this house. You're the one who needs to leave. My name is Han, and I am 42 years old this year. If anyone met me in person, they would probably think I'm a quite lucky woman. My husband has a stable job, my daughter is well behaved, and our house is nice. Many people even say I'm blessed because I live with my mother-in-law without the domestic friction others face. But only those involved truly understand. You can endure something once or 10 times, but after 4 years, even stone would crack." 4 years ago, my brother-in-law, too, went bankrupt, and the whole family was in an uproar. Some said he failed at land investment, others said he was swindled in a business venture. But I later found out that most of that money was poured into gambling, football betting, and partying with bad company. When the creditors showed up at his door, he couldn't even keep the house his father had left him. I still vividly remember that afternoon. My mother-in-law, Mrs. Tho, sat at our gate crying until her eyes were swollen. Beside her was Tu, with disheveled hair and wrinkled clothes. She grabbed my husband's hand, her voice trembling. "Duck, you are the only one I can rely on now. Your brother and I have nowhere else to go." At that moment, I pulled my husband inside to talk privately. I asked him, "Have you thought this through? Letting them stay will easily cause problems." But Duck just sighed. "That's my mother and brother. If we don't help them, where would they go?" Looking into my husband's eyes, I didn't have the heart to object further. And so, my mother-in-law and brother-in-law moved in. Initially, they said they would only stay for a few months, but those months turned into 4 years. 4 years is enough time for many things to change. This house was originally the property of my husband and me. We both worked from morning till night, saving every penny to afford it. There were times we had to take out bank loans, and every month, seeing the interest deduction notification would keep me awake at night. Yet, I don't know when it started, but people outside began rumored that this house belonged to my mother-in-law. The one spreading that story was none other than her. Every time relatives came to visit, she would smilingly introduce it. "This house is mine. Duck and his wife just live here to make it easier to take care of their old mother." The first time I heard it, I was stunned, but Duck just laughed. He told me to just let it be. "Mom is old now. Having a little bit of pride doesn't hurt anyone." Hearing my husband say that, I tried to bite my tongue. Little did I know, that sense of pride kept growing. It grew so much that someone started believing this house was truly hers. That person was Mai Kai, Tu's newlywed wife. Mai Kai had been a daughter-in-law for less than a week. She was nearly 20 years younger than me, pretty, and spoke sweetly, but her eyes were always darting around calculatingly. From the very first day we met, I had a feeling this girl wasn't simple. Sure enough, just a few days after the wedding, I saw Mai Kai constantly taking photos inside the house. She took photos in the living room, the dining room, and the garden too. Even my daughter's study corner appeared on her personal profile. Under each photo were captions full of hidden meanings. "Life is turning a new page. Finally have a home of my own." For a woman, choosing the right husband is more important than 10 years of hard work. Her friends commented below, competing to congratulate her. Some even commented, "Such a beautiful house." Mai Kai immediately replied, "Our home." When my daughter read those posts, she innocently asked, "Mom, why does Auntie Kai say our house is hers?" I could only pat her head. Grown-ups sometimes just like to joke, honey. But in my heart, I knew Mai Kai was not joking at all. She truly believed this house would belong to her. And the one who planted that belief in her head was my mother-in-law. That morning, Duck and I took our daughter for her routine health checkup. We didn't get back until near noon, and as soon as the car stopped at the gate, I noticed something unusual. The iron gate that was usually left ajar was shut tight today. Standing in front of the gate was Mai Kai. She dangled a set of keys in her hand, her face full of smug satisfaction. As soon as I stepped out of the car, she crossed her arms and said coldly, "Why are you still coming back here?" I thought I had misheard her. "What did you say?" Mai Kai sneered. "Mom has already given this house to my husband and me. From today on, you two should find somewhere else to live." Get out. The air seemed to freeze. My daughter clung to me in fear. I felt my blood boiling. But before I could speak, Duck stepped out of the car. He looked at Mai Kai for a few seconds, then at the keys in her hand. Without anger, yelling, or arguing, he simply laughed. It was a strangely calm smile. Mai Kai frowned. What are you laughing at? Duck slowly closed the car door, then looked her straight in the eye and said something that left the whole yard stunned. I've already sold this house. You're the one who needs to get out. Mai Kai stood frozen by my husband's words. The keys in her hand clinked softly together, but in that silent courtyard, the sound was incredibly clear. Seconds ago, she was still acting like a new homeowner full of herself. Yet just one sentence from Duck made the makeup on her face seem to harden. She frowned, her voice starting to sharpen. What nonsense are you talking about? This house belongs to Mom. She said she'd give it to us after the wedding. How could you sell it? Duck did not answer immediately. He just looked at her and then at the gate, which was locked from the inside. I stood beside him, one hand on my daughter's shoulder, the other gripping my bag tightly. I felt both angry and cold inside. I was angry because someone who hadn't even been in this house for 7 days was kicking me out of my own home. But I felt cold because I realized this certainly wasn't Mai Chi's own idea. She held the keys up in front of me, her voice becoming more triumphant by the second. Look closely, Mom has already given the keys to me. The living room key, the storage key, the gate key, and even the master bedroom key. If you aren't giving me this house, then why are you handing me these? I looked at that keychain and nearly burst out laughing. Among them was a tarnished brass key, the one to the old lock replaced 2 years ago. There was a small key, the one to the shoe cabinet on the porch. That cabinet's hinges broke a long time ago. Mrs. Tho handed Mai Kai a whole bunch of useless old keys. Yet, she still thought she'd just been granted ownership. Before I could say anything, Mai Kai tilted her chin and looked me up and down. You've been here a long time, so you should know your place. I just married into the family and will give them an heir later on. It's only right that Mom favors my husband and me. You two have a daughter, you could go rent a place, why keep clinging to your in-laws' house? That remark felt like a knife cutting through my heart. Not because she looked down on me, but because my daughter was standing right there. She's only 10, she doesn't fully grasp the cruelty of adult words, but she's sensitive enough to know she was just belittled. I felt her tiny hand gripping my shirt tightly. I leaned down and whispered, "Go sit in the car first." She looked up at me, her eyes already slightly red. Mom, why did Ms. Kai say our home is an in-law's house? I choked back my words. Duck stepped forward, patted her head, and spoke very gently. It's okay, sweetheart, this is our house. I'll explain everything in a moment. Quote. Just then, the front door opened. Mrs. Tho stepped out, wearing a dark brown silk outfit with her hair tied back. She looked at us, then at Mai Kai, without the slightest hint of surprise. Just by that look, I understood. She knew everything. She might have even been the one who pushed Mai Kai to block the door. Mrs. Tho sighed, acting as if she were in a difficult position. Han, Duck, I don't want this mess either, but Tu and his wife are newlyweds and need stability. You two are doing well, renting a place for a while won't kill you. Duck looked at his mother, his voice dropping. How can you say something like that? Mrs. Tho immediately frowned. Then what do you want me to do? I'm old now. Do you really want to see your brother get married without me providing for him? Why bother with paperwork for a family house and ruin our bond? That word, bond, left a bitter taste in my throat. Back then, it was also for the sake of that bond that we opened our doors for her and her son to move in. Thinking we were family and shouldn't keep score, I overlooked her hosting guests, rearranging our furniture, and telling everyone this house was hers. But it turns out some people don't see compromise as a gesture of kindness. They see it as a sign to take advantage. Duck asked bluntly, "What have you contributed, Mother? Have you ever had your name on the deed for this house?" Mrs. Tho froze, her lips trembling, unable to speak at first. Seeing this, Maikai chimed in with a shrill voice. How are you talking to your mother? She is the head of the family. If she says it's for someone, it's for them. Back home, children don't talk back to their parents like you do. I looked at her and asked calmly. So, in your hometown, are people taught to take what isn't theirs and give it away? Maikai blushed but still tried to act defiant. Don't try to twist my words. I only know that Mother said this house is hers. Mother giving it to my husband and me is enough. Duck let out a cold laugh. Enough for you, but not enough for the law. Mrs. Tho's expression changed slightly when she heard the word law. She immediately lowered her voice and turned to me. Han, you're a woman, you should know how to keep the peace. Houses can be bought again, but family affection, once lost, cannot be regained. I stared at her for a long time. The woman before me who had stood at my gate 4 years ago, clutching a bag of clothes, crying and saying she had nowhere else to go. Back then, I had been soft-hearted. I cleaned her room, bought extra bedding, cooked extra meals, and even told my daughter to be respectful to her grandmother and uncle too. Yet today, she is the one using the word family to force me out of the house my husband and I worked so hard for. I said slowly, Mother, I used to think being patient would keep our home together, but today I realize that some people just think they have more rights the more they are indulged. Mrs. Tho darkened. Is that how you talk to your mother-in-law? Duck stepped in front of me. He didn't raise his voice, but every word was clear. Mother, stop talking to Han. Let me handle this. Quote. Then he turned to me, his voice softening. Take our child and go wait in the car. The sun is getting high, and it's not worth it for our child to stand here and hear this. I looked at my husband and saw a strange sense of calm in his eyes. It wasn't the patience he'd shown before. It was the calm of someone who had decided not to back down anymore. Maikai still wouldn't let it go, standing right in the middle of the gate. She snapped, no one is allowed into this house. If you want to take things, I need to check them first. From today on, this house is mine. Duck looked at her, and this time, the smile on his lips had completely faded. You've only been in this house for 7 days, and you're already demanding to search the owner's belongings? He paused for a beat and continued, Maikai, if you're going to be greedy, be smart about it. Don't let people hand you a bunch of old keys and think you're holding the whole fortune. Quote. Maichi's face turned pale, while Mrs. Tho quickly looked away, as if afraid Duke's gaze would pierce through the secrets she was hiding. Hearing Duck mention the old keys, Maikai stood stunned for a few seconds, looking down at the keys in her hand, her eyes beginning to waver. But quickly, that confusion was hidden behind her familiar, defiant expression. Maikai squeezed the keys tight, pressing her lips together as if simply holding them firmly would make the house truly belong to her. Watching that scene, memories of the past suddenly flooded my heart. There are some things that, if I hadn't been pushed to the edge today, I might never have wanted to bring up again in my life, because mentioning it isn't about taking credit, but to see one thing clearly. There are people who are saved once, twice, and in the end, they think the whole world owes them a debt. Back when my father-in-law was alive, he was a gentle man but very firm and principled. He wasn't very wealthy, but having worked as a carpenter all his life, he had saved up 2 small houses. Before he passed away, he called Duck and Two to his bedside to give them instructions. His voice was very weak, but every word remained clear. Dad didn't leave behind much gold or silver, just 2 houses. One for each of you. If you keep it, you'll always have a place to return to, but if you squander it, you're on your own. Duck held Dad's hand at that moment, just nodding with red, teary eyes. As for Two, he stood at the foot of the bed with his head down. I couldn't tell if he was really listening. Looking back later, I realized that the parting words of those about to pass may seem light as the wind, but they are markers to reveal one's true heart. Duke's house was quite small at first, looking old with a low roof and a front yard only big enough for 2 motorbikes. After we got married, he and I discussed mortgaging the house to raise more capital for business. I worked as an accountant for a materials company. Meanwhile, Duck opened a small furniture workshop, taking orders for tables and shelves for regular customers. Some months he was swamped and slept at the shop, while other months were dead quiet. The 2 of us would sit looking at the bank debt ledger and sigh. But we didn't dare to complain. I always told myself that the house was built with sweat, with our youth, and with nights spent tallying bills to see if we could still afford the interest. The house looks grand today, but behind it lie countless rushed meals and many Tet holidays when we didn't dare buy new clothes. So many times our daughter asked why we didn't go on big trips like her friends. 2 was different. The house Dad left him was actually nicer than Duke's and sat on a wide alleyway. If he had been willing to work hard, 2 would have had a great foundation to start his life. But he didn't appreciate it. At first, 2 said he was taking the deed to get a loan to open a coffee shop. Mrs. Tho was so happy, bragging everywhere that her youngest had a head for business. Later, the coffee shop was nowhere to be seen, only 2 sporting a new phone, riding a big bike, and smelling of expensive perfume. When Duck asked, he just laughed it off, saying, "Big brother, you worry too much. These days you have to network and invest in your image to make money." Duck reminded him gently, "Whatever you do, don't touch the house Dad left behind." 2 even patted his brother's shoulder then, his voice full of confidence. "Don't worry, I'm not that foolish." But people who claim they aren't foolish are sometimes the most reckless ones of all. Just over a year later, the creditors started showing up. At first, it was just midnight calls, then tattooed men stood at 2's doorstep. Then one afternoon, Mrs. Tho called Duck in a panic. "Son, your brother is in trouble. They're threatening to seize the house." When Duck rushed over, 2 had already disappeared. Mrs. Tho sat on the floor, hair disheveled, muttering over and over, "He's still young, he was just led astray by his friends." I stood next to my husband, my heart heavy hearing that. Because I know, a mother's blind love can turn her child's mistakes into the fault of everyone else. In the end, 2's house had to be sold urgently to pay the debt, forced into a sale far below market value. On the day of the sale, Duck stood in the hallway for a long time, saying nothing, but I saw his knuckles turn white as he gripped his hands. It wasn't just 2's house, it was the final legacy my father-in-law left for his youngest son. After that, 2 moved in with me and his mother. Mrs. Tho said to us, "Let us stay for a few days. Once 2 is settled, we will move out immediately." I still remember cleaning the small room myself, the one in the back for her and 2. I bought extra mattresses, new curtains, and cleared the closet for their things. At the time, my daughter was still little and innocently ran around saying, "Grandma is staying with us now, our house will be so much livelier." At first, Mrs. Tho did seem to know her place. She cooked a few meals and occasionally helped me look after the child. But before long, everything started to change. She moved our family's small altar on her own, claiming its position didn't suit 2's zodiac year. She invited relatives over without asking us first. She stood in the middle of the living room, pointing and telling me to change the curtains because the old ones looked tacky. 2 became more and more irresponsible. He would say he was looking for work during the day, but come home reeking of alcohol at night. Once, he brought a whole group of friends home to drink until after midnight. When the neighbors came to complain, Mrs. Tho just brushed it off. "They're young, just let them have their fun." Duck tried many times to speak up, but then stopped himself. He told me, "I know you're frustrated, but Mom lost Dad already. 2 just lost his house. If we're too harsh, Mom will suffer. Because I love my husband, I endured it. I endured it so much that they even forgot this house has an owner. They got used to walking right in, using my things, and treating our kindness as an obligation." And today, after all those years, 2 married Mai Kai, a girl who doesn't know what it took to get this house, yet dares to stand at the gate and order us out. Thinking of that, I looked at Mai Kai, then at Mrs. Tho, who was avoiding Duke's gaze. Deep down, I felt strangely calm. Because I realized this is no longer just about a bunch of keys or some empty bragging. The root of it all began the day 2 sold the house Dad left behind with his own hands. Then my mother-in-law used her pride to cover up that mistake. Hiding it, covering it up forever. In the end, they fabricated a dream of wealth to deceive a new daughter-in-law. And now, that dream is starting to crack right at my front gate. From the moment Mai Kai stepped into the house, I felt a very uncomfortable sensation. It's not that I hate the newcomer, nor do I look down on her background. I also rose from days of hardship, knowing the feeling of counting every penny, but the poor who have self-respect are noble. Those who have nothing yet rush to look down on others will sooner or later make themselves miserable. Mai Kai doesn't seem like a new bride settling into her husband's home. She walked into my house as if it were a place already promised to her. Just after the wedding, before her suitcases were even unpacked, she went around looking into every corner, touching the living room sofa, opening kitchen cabinets to check the dishes, and filming videos from the gate to the front door. I was setting the dinner table when I heard her talking on the phone. "Yeah, the house is huge, the living room is nice, the kitchen is beautiful too. I told you so. When you marry, you have to look for stability. What's the point of loving someone poor?" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for me to hear. I was standing in the kitchen, my hand gripping the chopsticks suddenly froze. Duck heard it at that moment too. He looked at me and shook his head slightly, signaling me not to mind it. But just because you don't mind certain words doesn't mean they don't sting. After dinner, Kai posted several photos online. The first was of our living room. The second was the dining corner where I had personally picked out every chair. The third was the small courtyard where my daughter planted some moss rose pots. She wrote, "New nest after the wedding. When a woman picks the right man, she doesn't have to struggle anymore." Seeing that, I felt uncomfortable inside. I spoke very softly. "Kai, next time you post photos of the house, please avoid taking pictures of Lynn's room and things. She's grown up now, she needs her privacy." Kai was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her phone, and looked up with a faint smile upon hearing that. "Oh, you're so particular, we're all family. Besides, the house is beautiful, so posting it is just for fun, it costs nothing." Before I could answer, Tu walked in from outside, smelling faintly of beer. He laughed dismissively. "Han is always so principled, just let my wife be. She's new to her husband's home, being a bit excited is normal." The phrase, "husband's home," rolled off his tongue easily, but there was something very strange in Tu's eyes at that moment. He didn't look carefree. He looked like someone trying hard to play a role in front of others. A few days later, I started to notice. Kai wasn't just posting photos for fun. She was trying to build an image completely different from reality. To her friends, she bragged about marrying into a city family, having a loving mother-in-law, and a brother-in-law with a big business. Someone asked if she was still going to work. She replied nonchalantly that she would likely take a break to stay home and manage the family's assets. Reading that, I found it both laughable and chilling. They had been married for only a week. She didn't even know where the salt was kept in the kitchen, yet she was already thinking about managing assets. But there are two sides to every story. If no one had been whispering in her ear, where would Kai get such unwavering confidence? The ones whispering in her ear were none other than Tu and my mother-in-law. Once, I passed by Mrs. Tho's room, and the door was ajar. I heard her voice, low but clear. "Don't worry, I only care for you and your husband. This house will eventually go to Tu, no matter what. His brother and sister have money, they have plenty of places to live." Kai replied, her voice sweet as sugar. "I'm just afraid Han won't agree, mother. She looks gentle, but I find her quite fierce." Mrs. Tho scoffed. "Even if she's fierce, she's still just a daughter-in-law. I'm still here. Does she dare to defy me?" I stood in the hallway, stunned, as if nailed to the spot. I used to think Mrs. Tho was just being proud with her words. I never expected she truly considered this house something she had the right to divide. And instead of stopping his mother's delusions, Tu let his wife believe them. The night before the incident at the door, I went to the kitchen for water and heard Tu on the phone in the backyard. His voice was very low, but because the night was quiet, every word reached my ears. "Don't worry, the wedding is over. The house is about to be transferred to us, I won't run." The person on the other end seemed to say something very harsh. Tu immediately lowered his voice. "Give me a few more days. Once I have the house, I can mortgage it. Don't make a scene right now." I stood behind the kitchen door, my hands icy cold. Debts again. Tu was in debt again. And this time, he was using our own house as bait to reassure his creditor. I didn't tell Duck that night because I was afraid he wouldn't sleep, but the next morning, while taking our child for a checkup, I told him everything in the car. After listening, Duck was silent for a long time, his hands on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white. A moment later, he said, "I knew he had issues." I turned to look at my husband. "How long have you known?" Duck let out a sigh. "A few days ago, he noticed his office door was open and the house documents had been moved. He checked the camera and saw Tu sneaking in while the whole house was asleep." My heart sank. "Then why didn't you say anything?" "I wanted to see how far he would go." That sentence made me understand. Duke's calmness over the past few days wasn't because he was ignoring it. I had already seen the path to was sliding down. I was just waiting for one last chance for my brother to stop himself. But unfortunately, Tu didn't stop. He even dragged Mai Kai into it, making her the one to cause trouble while he hid behind her. Perhaps after that phone call, Mai Kai also started to have doubts. She was afraid that if she didn't act fast, the house wouldn't end up being hers. A greedy person, when they see bait right in front of them, is usually no longer clear-headed enough to tell truth from lies. That's why this morning she held that old set of keys and stood blocking the door, thinking that as long as she chased us out, everything would become reality. I looked at Mai Kai standing defiantly in the courtyard and felt both angry and pitiful. She thought she was smart, but in reality, she was just a pawn in the lies of Tu and his mother. The only thing is, once she chose to stand at someone else's doorstep to tell the owners to leave, she was no longer innocent. Duck stood up straight at that moment. He didn't shout, didn't scold, and wasn't in a hurry to reveal the whole truth. He just looked at Tu, who was peeking out from the main door, and said slowly, "Tu, come out here. You can't let your wife speak for you forever." Quote. Hearing his name, Tu's face flashed with a change, while Mai Kai spun around to look at her husband, a flicker of genuine unease appearing in her eyes for the first time. Called by name by Duck, Tu froze on the steps. He had just poked his head out, probably intending to check the situation and find a way to slip away, but he hadn't expected Duck to see him. Tu's face was very unsightly then, his lips slightly pale, his eyes darting quickly from me to Mai Kai, then looking at Mrs. Tho as if pleading for help. Seeing her husband remain silent, Mai Kai became even more uneasy. She pulled on Tu's arm, her voice snapping, "Say something, what exactly is going on here? Didn't you say Mom was going to give this house to us?" Tu swallowed hard, trying to appear calm. "Kai, don't listen to Duke's nonsense about the house. He's just trying to scare us." Quote. Duck looked at his younger brother, his gaze deepening. He didn't scold him, nor was he in a hurry to lose his temper. He simply walked toward the car, opened the trunk, and pulled out a neatly clipped blue folder. As he returned, the midday sun hit the red seal on the folder, causing Mrs. Tho's expression to change instantly. Duck placed the file on the car hood, his voice calm. "That's quite a threat, just look at the papers and you'll see." Mai Kai stepped forward quickly, but Duck did not give it to her first. He handed it straight to Mrs. Tho. "Mother, please look, because you are the eldest here, I want you to be the first to see it clearly." Mrs. Tho took the stack of papers with slightly trembling hands. She opened the first page, her eyes scanning the owner's section and lingering for a long time on the names of Duck and me. Her face shifted from rigid tension to deathly pale. She flipped through a few more pages, but the more she turned them, the more labored her breathing became. Mai Kai impatiently snatched the file away. "Let me see what there is to be shaking about like that." She bent down to read, initially maintaining a defiant look, but just seconds later, her voice choked up. The transfer contract contained full details of the house, signatures of the seller and buyer, notarized seals, and clear dates. What left Mai Kai stunned was that the signing date was 3 days before her wedding. She snapped her head up to look at Tu. "Explain this. 3 days before our wedding the house was already sold, so where were you planning to live with me?" Quote. Tu stepped back half a pace. "That's impossible, I didn't know about this." Duck looked at his younger brother with a cold smile. "You didn't know because you kept telling your wife that this house was about to be signed over to you too." Tu strained his neck. "You forged this contract, didn't you? You intentionally made this up just to kick us out." Hearing that, I couldn't hold it back any longer. I looked at Tu and said slowly, "Tu, house deeds aren't market receipts. You can't just fake them or claim ignorance to make it go away." Mai Kai still refused to believe it. She flipped through every page, her eyes turning red with anger. She pointed to the buyer's name and asked, "Who is Mr. Kai? Why sell it to this person?" Duck took out his phone and initiated a video call. After a few rings, the screen lit up, revealing a man in his 50s, stocky, square-faced, with hair starting to gray. He was wearing a dark shirt, sitting in an office with a mechanical workshop sign hanging behind him. The moment she saw him, Tu felt as if she'd been struck hard in the back of the neck, and the blood drained from her face. Duck held the phone out toward everyone. "Mr. Kai, I'm standing in front of the house, and some of my family members are claiming the transfer contract is fake. Could you please confirm it for me? Mr. Kai looked into the screen, his voice very clear. The contract is real, and the deposit has been transferred in full as agreed. In 7 days, I will take possession of the house. Mai Kai turned to Tu, her voice trembling. Do you know him? Tu didn't answer, but his silence said it all. On the other end of the line, Mr. Kai looked at Tu for a moment, then laughed coldly. Tu, you're there too? That's good, I was just about to look for you. The house is one thing, but your loan documents are another. Don't think you can hide forever. Mrs. Tho frantically chimed in. Mr. Kai, let's talk about that later. We have something going on at home today. Mr. Kai replied immediately. Miss Tho, I'm only doing things properly because I respect Duck. Otherwise, based on Tu's loan papers, I would have sent people over there a long time ago. The atmosphere in the yard was heavy as lead. The neighbors standing outside the gate started whispering. Mai Kai looked at Tu as if he were a stranger, while Tu kept his head bowed. His hands hung limply at his sides. He no longer looked like the boasting newlywed groom from a few days ago. Duck ended the call and opened another page of the contract. It clearly states here that after 7 days, everyone currently in the house must vacate the premises. Not a single day later. Mrs. Tho hurriedly grabbed Duke's hand. Duck, doing this is driving your mother into a dead end. I'm old now, where do you expect me to go? Duck looked at his mother, his eyes pained but resolute. Mom, I never intended to leave you homeless, but I have sold this house, and the money will not be used to pay off Tu's debts anymore. Mrs. Tho stood frozen. Duck continued, Han and I have our own plans. For years we've lived together, putting up with one thing after another. I had thought about taking you to a better place after selling the house. But after today, I'm glad I hadn't said anything yet. Hearing those words, I felt a sharp pain in my heart. That plan, my husband and I had kept it very well hidden. We once thought that when everything was finished, we would give my mother-in-law the good news so she could hold her head high among the relatives. Little did we know that before we could surprise her, she and her youngest son and his new wife would stab us so deeply in the back. Mai Kai suddenly screamed. So I've been deceived? Your whole family deceived me? Duck looked at her. Neither my wife nor I deceived you. Who was the one who promised you the house? You should ask that person yourself. Mai Kai snapped her head toward Tu. You said this house belonged to your mother. You said after we married, I would be the lady of the house. You said I wouldn't need to work anymore. Everything was just a lie you made up, wasn't it? Tu remained silent. That very silence drove Mai Kai nearly insane. Mrs. Tho could no longer maintain her superior air. Angry and fearful, she turned to blame Duck, saying that after all, he is your own brother, and selling the house to his creditor is no different than putting a knife to his throat. Duck looked at his mother for a long time and said, No, Mother, the one putting the knife to Tu's throat isn't me, it's you and him. I have been saving him for 4 years. Today, I am simply stopping. That sentence fell onto the courtyard like the slamming of a door, and no one could say another word. Just then, the sound of a car pulling up echoed from the end of the alley. A black pickup truck slowly parked in front of the gate, the door opened, and the person who stepped out was Mr. Kai. Seeing him in person, Mai Kai backed away. Tu's face turned pale, and he looked as if he wanted to turn and run into the house. As for me, I gently squeezed my daughter's hand in the car, knowing that from this moment on, the lies of Tu and his mother could no longer be hidden. As soon as Mr. Kai stepped out of the car, the entire courtyard fell deathly silent. He didn't come alone. Behind him was a young man carrying a briefcase, likely his legal assistant or accountant. Mr. Kai didn't raise his voice or act threatening, but just his mere appearance was enough to make Tu take another step back. Mai Kai looked at Mr. Kai, then turned to look at her husband. At this moment, the triumph on her face had completely vanished, leaving only confusion, anger, and the fear of ending up with nothing. She grabbed Tu's arm, her fingernails digging deep into his skin. Tell me, who is this man? Why did you turn so pale just hearing his name? Tu tried to pull his arm away but couldn't. He snapped back in a low voice. Stop making such a scene. Let's go inside to talk. Mai Kai immediately screamed. Go inside? Which house? The house you claimed was yours has already been sold. Do you still have the nerve to tell me to go inside? That sentence echoed all the way out to the gate. The neighbors, who had been watching for a while, crowded even closer. Some pretended to water plants, Others stood on the porch holding their grandkids, but all their eyes were fixed on our courtyard. Seeing the crowd of neighbors, Mrs. Tho turned beet red, both ashamed and furious. She turned to Mai Kai and barked, "Keep your voice down. You've only been married a few days and you're already screaming in the yard? Have you no shame?" Quote. Mai Kai burst out laughing, but it wasn't the smug smile from before. It was the laughter of someone who just realized they had been made a laughingstock. "You're talking to me about shame now? You were the one who said I was your youngest daughter-in-law. You said this house would be for us eventually. You were the one who gave me the keys and told me to treat this as my own home from now on." Mrs. Tho was struck dumb. She glanced at Duck as if afraid he had heard clearly, but everything was already too late. Mai Kai no longer cared about being discreet. She spun toward Tu, her voice trembling with rage. "You said we'd have a house after the wedding. You said your mother loved you the most. You said you were just having temporary financial troubles and that the family assets would eventually be yours. You lied to me about everything, didn't you?" Tu gritted his teeth. "That's enough out of you. Before we got married, you didn't really love me sincerely either. You only agreed to marry me so quickly because you saw my family was well off." That statement was like adding fuel to the fire. Mai Kai froze for a few seconds before suddenly raising her hand and slapping Tu very hard. The dry sound of the slap made even Mrs. Tho jump. "How dare you talk to me when, if you hadn't bragged about your house and your wealthy mother, and promised I wouldn't have to work after we married, would I have been stupid enough to marry you?" I stood by the car, listening to every word as my heart turned cold. It turns out this marriage, not even a week old, was built entirely on boasts and calculations. One person wanted a wife to act as a shield against creditors. One person wanted a husband to change her life. Once the flashy paint was scraped away, all that remained underneath was something pathetically bare. Mr. Kai finally spoke up, his voice not loud but perfectly clear. "I didn't come here to watch a husband and wife argue. I came to remind Tu of one thing. Your debt is now 3 months overdue." Tu immediately turned to him, lowering his voice almost to a plea. "Uncle Kai, please give me a little more time, I'm working on it." Mr. Kai looked at him, his gaze icy. "Are you working on it by telling people this house is about to be yours?" That question silenced Tu instantly. Mai Kai snapped her head toward her husband, eyes wide, while Mrs. Tho stumbled and leaned against the gatepost. Mr. Kai signaled for his companion to open the briefcase. The man took out a stack of loan documents and placed them right on the car hood next to the house sale files. Every sheet had Tu's signature, the date, the amount, and a note regarding the collateral, the family home they were living in. I glanced at the numbers and my heart tightened. One for 300 million, another for 500 million, plus several smaller ones. It all added up to quite a lot. Duck picked up one to look at it, his expression darkening with every second. "How much do you owe?" Tu kept his head down and didn't answer. Mr. Kai spoke for him, including principal and interest, over 2 billion, and that's not even counting the private loans I'm not involved in. Mai Kai looked drained of all strength. She stepped back, hit the stairs, and slumped down, muttering, "Over 2 billion? Did you marry me just to have me shoulder your debt?" Quote. Tu replied irritably, "Who asked you to shoulder it? You only married me because you thought I had money and a house, and now you're acting like the victim." Mai Kai looked up sharply, tears streaming down, but her voice was still sharp as a knife. "Yes, I'm greedy for money, I won't deny it, but I want real wealth, not some guy drowning in debt who still plays the rich playboy." That statement made Tu rush forward, intending to pull her up. Duck immediately stepped in to block him. "That's enough." His voice wasn't loud, but it was firm. Tu froze, his eyes turning red. "You're great, aren't you, selling the house and washing your hands of it? Do you even think of me as your brother?" Duck looked at his brother for a long time. His expression was calm, but I knew he was hurting inside. It's not that he hasn't saved Tu over the past 4 years. He's done it so many times that today, Tu can stand there and blame him as if he were the one at fault. Duck said slowly, "I do, and precisely because you are my brother, I let you and Mom stay here for 4 years. It was because you're my brother that I paid off your first few debts. But you didn't see that as an opportunity, you saw it as an excuse to keep messing up." Mrs. Tho burst into tears. "Duck, please, I beg you, he's still your brother after all, just help him one last time." Duck turned to look at his mother, his eyes turning red. "Mom, Do you even know how many times you've begged me for this? Mrs. Tho was choked with emotion. Her face at that moment was a mix of panic, shame, and helplessness. Meanwhile, Mai Kai sat on the steps, covering her face and crying silently. She was no longer the arrogant mistress holding the keys and blocking the door earlier. She was just a young woman pushed by her own greed into a marriage full of debt and lies. Mr. Kai gathered his papers and said to Duck, "I respect you, so today I'm just clarifying everything. As for Tu's debt, he has to handle it himself. I won't make you and your wife bear it." Duck nodded. "Thank you, sir. I will hand over the house as per the contract." Hearing the words, "hand over," Mai Kai looked up with an empty gaze. She looked at the house in front of her, then at Tu, and finally laughed through her tears. "I see, so the one who has to get out isn't just me, it's both of us." No one replied to that, because the truth was all too clear. In that courtyard, everyone was witnessing the price of the lies they had helped build. As for me, I quietly opened the car door for my daughter so she wouldn't have to hear more adults tearing each other apart. Not long after Mr. Kai left, my courtyard was left with a very heavy silence. That silence was unlike the usual quiet. It was like the aftermath of a storm. The roof remained, the walls remained, but everything inside had been turned upside down. Mai Kai sat slumped on the steps, her eyes red, her hair that had been styled perfectly this morning now a tangled mess. Tu stood a few steps away, head down, his face a mix of shame and anger, while Mrs. Tho clung to the gate, breathing heavily like someone drained of all strength. I was about to open the car door to tell my daughter to stay put for a moment when Mrs. Tho's choked voice sounded from behind. "Duck, wait, stay." Duck stopped but didn't turn around right away. I looked at my husband's shoulders that had carried so much over the past 4 years, carrying his mother, his brother, and even the insults from his own family, forcing himself to endure time and time again. Mrs. Tho stumbled forward. For the first time, I saw that my mother-in-law no longer had the air of a woman who loved to command. She didn't yell, didn't scold, and no longer used that familiar, superior tone. She just looked at Duck, her lips trembling. "Don't be angry with me, I was wrong." Duck turned around. He looked at his mother for a long time, his eyes red but his voice still calm. "Where was I wrong?" That question made Mrs. Tho freeze. Perhaps her whole life she was used to saying, "I was wrong," to hope her children would soften, never having to truly name her mistakes. She lowered her face, her hands twisting together. I just wanted to save a little face. I'm old. When I go out, people ask about my house and children. I didn't want to be mocked for being a mother whose son had to live in someone else's house." Duck gave a sad smile. "So you told everyone this house belonged to you?" Mrs. Tho didn't answer. "So you promised Mai Kai the house that belongs to my wife and me?" She remained silent. Duck stepped one step closer to his mother. His voice dropped, but every word felt heavy as stone. "Do you know what hurts me the most, Mother? It's not that you lied to everyone, and it's not that you favored Tu. What hurts most is that you took my house, my wife's hard work, and our youth, and promised them to someone else like a toy you have the right to give away." Mrs. Tho burst into tears. This sobbing no longer sounded like the manipulative crying from before. It was choked, fragmented, and full of shame. She suddenly collapsed, clutching Duke's legs. "Duck, please, I beg you. I know I was wrong, but please show me mercy just this one more time. I cannot bear to see your brother pushed into a corner." I saw Duck immediately lean down to help her up, but she stubbornly refused to stand. He clenched his jaw, his voice raspy. "Get up, Mother. If the neighbors see you like this, they'll think I'm unfilial." Quote. Mrs. Tho shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't care. As long as you save Tu, I can endure any humiliation." Duck suddenly laughed, but that laugh sounded more painful than crying. "So you can endure humiliation for Tu, is that it? For the past 4 years, Han has endured humiliation in this house. Have you ever thought about that?" Mrs. Tho froze. Duck turned to look at me, his eyes filled with regret. Then he looked back at his mother, beginning to list things one by one, not to boast, but like someone finally opening an old chest filled with wounds kept hidden for too long. "The day you and Tu moved in, Han was the one who cleaned your room. You said your back hurt, So Han bought a new mattress. You said your arthritis medication was expensive, so Han transferred the money herself. 2 caused trouble with the neighbors. Han was the one who brought gifts to apologize. During Ted and anniversaries, the house was full of relatives. Who cooked, who cleaned, and who paid for the groceries? It was Han. I lowered my head, my throat tight. I had tried to forget those things, but when Duck said them, I realized it wasn't that he hadn't noticed. He saw everything, it's just that, like me, he thought if we put up with a little more, the house would stay peaceful. Duck continued. And what about me? I paid off Tu's debts. The first time, you said he was young and naive. The second time, you said he was tricked by his friends. The third time, you cried and said if I didn't help, he would die. And today, he owes over $2 billion, and Mom is asking me to save him again. Tu stood behind, his face turning bright red. You saying that is no different than shaming me in front of everyone. Duck turned sharply toward Tu. You're still afraid of losing face? When you took my house to show off to your wife, were you afraid then? When you said this house was about to be mortgaged to pay off your debts, did you think about my wife and child? Tu was speechless. Micah, sitting on the steps, also went silent and didn't dare to intervene anymore. Mrs. Tho cried even louder. Mom was wrong. I know I loved him too blindly, but Duck, he is your own brother. Duck took a deep breath. I saw his hand tremble slightly, but his voice was very clear when he spoke. I have never forgotten that he is my brother, but Mom, please don't forget that Han is my wife and little Lin is my daughter. If I use all my strength to save Tu, who will save my wife and child? He made me unable to hold back my tears, not out of self-pity, but because for the first time in years, my husband stood up to his mother and clearly stated that his wife and child also need protection. Mrs. Tho looked up at me, her eyes filled with both remorse and confusion. It was as if only then did she truly see me as a person who had stood in this house for years, not just a silent shadow serving everyone. Duck bent down to help his mother up. This time, she didn't resist. He said slowly, Mom, listen to me, I'm not abandoning you, and I won't push Tu onto the street, but I will not use the money from selling the house to pay Tu's debts anymore. Whoever borrowed the money, that person must take responsibility. I can help him find a lawyer and negotiate legally, but I will not carry the burden for him. Mrs. Tho was stunned. So where will I live? Duck was silent for a few seconds then replied, I will rent a decent place for you while the house is being handed over. As for Tu, if he still wants to be a decent person, he should go to work and pay his debts himself. From today on, my house will no longer be a place where anyone can use family ties to force me. Hearing that, Mai Kai looked up as if she had just seen a glimmer of hope, but Duck turned to her immediately. As for you, Mai Kai, you just became a daughter-in-law here. Honestly, I didn't want to be harsh, but you stood in front of my door demanding I kick my wife and child out. From that moment on, you are no longer innocent. Mai Kai bit her lip, unable to say a word. Mrs. Tho hung her head as tears fell onto the courtyard. As for Tu, he looked at Duck with eyes full of resentment mixed with fear. I know Duke's decision didn't satisfy everyone completely, but it was the first time he wasn't blindly soft-hearted. He still provided his mother a place to stay and his brother a path to correct his mistakes, but he also closed the door on them encroaching on our lives. And in that very moment, I understood that my husband had truly changed. After Duke's words, Mrs. Tho stood frozen in the middle of the courtyard. Perhaps she thought that if she just cried, if she just mentioned their mother-son bond, Duck would soften as he had before. But not this time. He helped her stand steady and spoke measuredly, but there was a clear boundary in his eyes. That boundary was not to sever family ties, but to protect his wife and child from endless demands. Sitting on the step, Mai Kai immediately looked up upon hearing Duck say he would rent a temporary place for Mrs. Tho. In her still red eyes, a glimmer of calculation suddenly flashed. She wiped her tears away in a hurry, her voice sounding much less harsh. Duck, you just said you have your own plans. Does that mean you too have another place, right? Hearing that question, my heart suddenly turned cold. A normal person in this situation would be worried about a marriage revealed to be full of lies, a $2 billion dong debt, or at least feel ashamed for having just kicked the homeowners out. But Mai Kai was different. As soon as she heard there was another place, she latched onto it. Duck looked at her without answering right away. Mrs. Tho also looked up, her eyes full of suspicion. What does Duck mean by that? Did you buy another house? At this point, Duck knew he couldn't hide it any longer. He took his phone out of his pocket, opened a photo folder, and showed it to his mother. On the screen was an image of a new house that was being finished. The house was spacious, with a front yard, a small garden on the side, shiny glass doors, and walls painted in elegant, subtle tones. It wasn't overly flashy like a luxurious mansion, but at a glance, you could tell it was designed to be meticulous, cozy, and convenient. Mrs. Tho froze the moment she saw it. Her hand trembled as she touched the phone screen. Is this your house? Duck nodded. Yes, mine and Han's. Maikai immediately jumped up, forgetting even to cry. This house was even bigger than their current one. I looked at her, clearly seeing the regret creeping bit by bit onto her face. It wasn't regret for having hurt others, but regret that she had almost been able to hold on to something bigger. Human greed is sometimes very easy to see. Just place a new benefit in front of them, and even their tears can dry up instantly. Duck swiped through a few more photos. One of the living room with lights being installed, one of a kitchen much larger than their old one, and one of a ground floor bedroom specifically designed for the elderly, with no high door steps and a bathroom with non-slip grab bars. Looking at that, Mrs. Tho suddenly collapsed onto the stone bench nearby. Who else is this room for? Duck was silent for a few seconds, then replied, For you, Mom. The atmosphere seemed to choke up. Even Tu, who had been standing with her head down, looked up at her brother. Mrs. Tho opened her mouth, but couldn't find the words to speak. Duck continued, his voice still calm but growing raspy. Han and I planned this since last year. You're getting older, and climbing stairs isn't good for you, so the new house has a private room on the first floor with a window overlooking the garden. Han even said to add a small yard so you could plant some flower pots and keep a bird for company. I lowered my head. That was exactly what I had said. Even though I had many grievances against Mrs. Tho, I still thought that if we moved to the new house, everything could start over more gently. I used to console myself that old people are often excessive because of their pride and their misguided way of loving their children. As long as I lived kindly, surely one day she would understand. Duck looked at his mother and slowly said, I intended to wait until the house was finished for your birthday to take you to see it. I even planned to invite the relatives for a meal so you could be proud. You like it when people praise your house and your successful children. I know, so I thought this time I would make you truly happy. Mrs. Tho covered her mouth with her hand. Tears fell, no longer with any noise or screaming. It was the cry of someone who just realized they had personally shattered something that was meant for them. She muttered, Mom, I didn't know. Duck replied gently, Because I hadn't told you yet, I wanted to surprise you. I looked over at Maikai. She stood motionless, her eyes still glued to her phone screen. When Duck mentioned the new house, her tone and way of speaking changed completely. She no longer spoke bluntly or loudly, but reservedly said, Duck, Han, about what happened earlier, I was just hot-headed. I'm new here, I just believed what Mom and Tu said. Quote, I didn't know this house was actually yours. I stared at her for a long time. I knew she was partly deceived, but no one forced her to tell us to get out earlier. No one put the contempt in her eyes when she mentioned my daughter, either. Being deceived does not mean being completely innocent. Duck put his phone in his pocket, his voice colder. If you didn't know, you could have asked. You didn't ask, but chose to block the door, chose to kick my wife and child out. That was your choice. Maikai was speechless. She turned to Mrs. Tho as if looking for support, but Mrs. Tho didn't even have the strength to defend anyone now. She just sat there, her red eyes looking down at her aged hands. A moment later, she softly asked, So now, can I still visit that house? That question made my heart ache. Even though she was wrong, very wrong, she is still Duke's mother. I turned to look at my husband. Duck did not answer right away. He looked at his mother and then at me. In his eyes, there was an apology, remorse, and a hope that I would understand him. I said softly, Let's figure that out later. Mom, the most important thing right now is for everyone to move out of this house on time. And from now on, no one is to use other people's property to make promises ever again. Mrs. Tho bowed her head. For the first time, she didn't argue back with me. Just then, Tu suddenly spoke up, his voice hoarse, saying you two have a new house now, and the old one is sold too. So, could you lend me a portion of the money from the house sale to pay off Mr. Kai? I closed my eyes for a moment. Just a moment ago, it seemed like everything had made Tu realize the truth, but this sentence proved he still didn't get it. He still thought all his brother's assets could serve as a life raft for him at any time. Duck looked at Tu, a bitter smile on his lips. Do you see now? Even now, you are still only thinking about money. Tu flushed and tried to argue, but Duck raised his hand to stop him. That money is for my wife and me to move to our new place, pay off bank debts, and provide for our children. Not a single cent is meant to fill the hole you dug for yourself. Hearing that, Mrs. Tho said nothing more. My Kai was also silent. As for me, I looked at the old house in front of me, and my heart felt a little lighter. I used to regret having to sell the place my husband and I had built together. But after that afternoon, I suddenly felt lucky that we had kept our new house a secret. Lucky that we hadn't shared our joy with people ready to turn our kindness into a bargaining chip. And also lucky that before stepping into a new life, we saw clearly who was sincere and who was only looking at the house behind us. The moment Tu finished asking for money, the whole yard fell into silence again. This silence was even heavier than when Mr. Kai brought out the debt note. Because before us was no longer a misguided younger brother who knew fear, but someone so used to being saved that he took others' sacrifices for granted. Duck looked at Tu for a long time. I know you are trying to hold back a lot inside. If it were a few years ago, perhaps he would have sighed and found a way to scrape up the money. But after everything that just happened, after Mai Chi's words telling us to get out, after the promises about the house that Tu and his mother made up, if that soft-heartedness continued, it would no longer be love, but harming our own family. Duck was about to say something when the man who came with Mr. Kai returned. At first, I thought he was an accountant, but looking closer, he had a very professional air about him. He carried a black briefcase and had a law firm badge clipped to his shirt. He walked up to Mr. Kai and whispered a few words to him. After listening, Mr. Kai turned to Duck. Duck, there is something I think we should clear up right now. It's not just the loan note, we also have an asset commitment document that Tu brought to us. Tu immediately looked up. Uncle Kai, can we talk about that in private? Mr. Kai looked at Tu, his eyes turned cold. When you took these papers to get a loan, did you tell your brother about it? That question left Tu speechless. Mrs. Tho's face went pale, and she hurried forward. Mr. Kai, please save some face for my family. Let's discuss this calmly. Mr. Kai sighed. Mrs. Tho, it is exactly because I respect Duck that I am bringing this up here. If we don't clear this up today, people will think they are involved in these documents later on. The lawyer opened his briefcase and placed a photocopy on the car hood. My heart tightened the moment I glanced at it. It was a copy of the land title deed, but the owner's name looked very strange, even though it was our house information. Below it, there was a handwritten note stating that the family agreed to let Mr. Nguyen Van Tu use the property as collateral while awaiting the title transfer. I looked at Duck. His face had turned ice cold. Where did this come from? Tu stepped back, his lips trembling. I just photocopied it to show them. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? Duck picked up the paper, his eyes lingering for a long time on the signatures. Then he turned to me. One glance was enough for me to see Duke's signature was clumsily forged, and mine was even more laughable. The handwriting was stiff and didn't resemble how I sign at all. I asked too, my voice so cold that even I was surprised by it. Did you sign for both of us? Tu waved his hands dismissively. No, I just had someone draft a temporary commitment letter. I didn't intend to scam anyone. I thought the house belongs to the family anyway, so what's the harm in you helping me a little? Mai Kai jumped up, snatched the paper to look at it, her face turning deathly pale. Did you really forge these documents? Tu shouted back, shut up. If you hadn't been demanding a house, a car, and a spa all the time, would I have needed to scramble for money like this? Quote. Mai Kai felt as if she had been slapped again. She stepped back, her eyes reddening with both anger and humiliation. You're blaming me? Before we married, you said you already had a house and I'd be the lady of the house as soon as I moved in. You said your mother loved you best and your brother was rich, so you didn't lack anything. Now you forge documents to borrow money and blame it on me? Quote, Mrs. Tho trembled as she reached out to steady herself against the gate. She looked at the paper in Mai Chi's hand, her voice cracking. Tu, have you really gone this far? Tu turned to his mother, his eyes full of resentment. Didn't you say that sooner or later Brother Duck would have to hand this house over to me? Didn't you say that since I'm the youngest son and Dad is gone, he has a responsibility toward me? Those words left Mrs. Tho stunned into silence. The words she had spoken out of favoritism, meant only to coddle her youngest son, had now become the excuse for Tu to spiral even further. I watched her and saw her shaking uncontrollably, unsure if it was from anger or fear. Duck put the paper down and asked slowly, how many people have you borrowed from using this? Tu hung his head and did not answer. Mr. Kai answered for him, at least 3 parties that I know of. Some lent money believing the house transfer was real, and others were even brought by Tu to take photos in front of the gate. I felt a chill run down my spine. So, while my wife and I were away at work, our house had been used as bait countless times. The walls, the gate, the living room, and the garden that we spent our youth building had, in Tu's hands, become props to gain the trust of creditors. Duck suddenly turned to Mai Kai. Do you see now? The keys you're holding aren't proof of ownership. They're just props in a play that Tu and my mother have been staging for too long. Quote. Mai Kai couldn't say a word. She looked at Tu, her eyes no longer holding any affection for her new husband, only horror and loathing. Mrs. Tho burst into tears. Duck, what should we do now? If this document forgery case reaches the police, your brother is finished. Duck looked at his mother, his eyes red but his voice clear. Mom, I'm not the one who forged the papers, and I'm not the one who used someone else's house to borrow money. Please don't make me pay for Tu's mistakes anymore. Tu suddenly lunged to grab the paper, but Duck was faster, gripping his wrist tight. The 2 brothers stood face to face. One who had saved his brother time and again, and one who used that kindness as a stepping stone for his greed. Duck growled, listen to me clearly. From now on, if you dare touch any papers related to my house again, I will turn you over to the law myself. Tu froze. This was the first time Duck had said that. It wasn't a threat, nor a fleeting burst of anger, but his final limit. Right at that moment, Mr. Kai's phone rang. He spoke a few short words on the phone, then turned to look at Duck. His voice dropped, saying others were also on their way. They claimed to have similar commitments, but for even larger amounts of money. Tu's legs gave out, and he nearly collapsed. Mrs. Tho clutched her chest, her face drained of all color. I looked at my husband, my heart heavy. It turned out today's disaster hadn't hit rock bottom yet. This house wasn't just promised to Mai Kai, and it wasn't just used to borrow from Mr. Kai. It might have been turned into a trap for many others by Tu. And I knew from that moment on, this was no longer just a family matter. Mr. Kai's words sent a chill down my spine. One such commitment had already caused enough chaos in our yard. Yet now, there were others on their way with papers for even larger sums. I turned to look at Tu, his face completely pale. His eyes darted around like a trapped animal in a corner. Mrs. Tho gripped Duke's arm tightly, her voice trembling. Duck, please don't let them come here. Can't we settle this behind closed doors? It would be so shameful if we let the whole world descend on our home. Duck looked at his mother, his gaze a mix of pity and exhaustion. Are you still worried about shame? When Tu took the house deed to borrow money, Mom, did you ever think this day would come? Mrs. Tho opened her mouth, but she couldn't say a word. Mai Kai stood nearby, still holding the photocopied paper, and suddenly let out a faint laugh. That laugh sounded hollow, like someone waking up from a beautiful dream to find themselves amidst ruins. Good grief, I've only been married a week and I've seen it all. The house isn't yours, the husband is drowning in debt, and the mother-in-law only cares about appearances. Your whole family is just a bunch of performers. Tu turned and shouted. Shut up. Mai Kai didn't shut up. She stepped closer to Tu, her eyes reddening. Are you afraid of what I might say? When you stood on the wedding stage, holding my waist and telling me I'd only have to enjoy life from now on, were you afraid then? When you told me to post pictures of the house for my friends to see, were you afraid then? Two was shaking with anger, but this time he didn't dare rush forward because Duck was standing right next to him, his eyes locked onto his every move. Less than 10 minutes later, a second car pulled up in front of the gate. This time, a woman in her 40s stepped out, dressed neatly, accompanied by a middle-aged man. She held a folder, and as soon as she saw Two, she pointed her finger straight at his face. Quote, "Two, you can't run away today." Two backed away, stammering. "Ms. Van, please calm down, I'm trying to get the money." The woman named Van gave a cold laugh. "Getting money? Are you getting it using a house that isn't even yours?" She took another commitment letter out of her bag. The content was similar to Mr. Kai's, but the amount written on it stunned me. 1 billion? Two had used the same house and the same promise of a title transfer to borrow money from many people. Not only that, the commitment letter included a photocopy of the house deed that had been edited even more cleverly. The signatures of Duck and me were placed right under the agreement to guarantee the loan. I picked up the paper, my hands shaking with anger. "You even dared to forge my signature." Two hung his head and didn't reply. Ms. Van turned to me, her voice harsh. "You are the real owner of the house, right? Then you must take responsibility. Your brother-in-law said the whole family agreed to guarantee it for him." Duck stepped forward immediately. "We did not guarantee any loans. All of these signatures are fake. If you need to, we will cooperate to verify." Ms. Van paused. Perhaps she did not expect Duck to be so calm. The man with her checked his phone and whispered, "Ms. Van, I told you, this file has issues. I filed a report this morning." Upon hearing the word report, Mrs. Tho nearly collapsed. She rushed in front of Ms. Van, crying and clasping her hands. Quote, "Ma'am, I beg you. He is young and foolish. Please give him time, don't send him to prison." Ms. Van looked at her, her voice cold. "My child is also young. They saved up money to give to Two believing there was collateral. Now the money is gone and the papers are fake. Tell me who should feel sorry for whom." That sentence made me choke up. By now, the victims were not just my husband and me, but others out there who believed Two's lies and lost real money. Everything had long since exceeded family boundaries. At that moment, the sound of a motorbike stopping at the gate was heard, followed by a white car slowly parking behind Ms. Van's vehicle. Two police officers stepped out. The atmosphere in the yard seemed to freeze. Seeing them, Two's legs went weak, and he had to lean on the steps to stay standing. An officer walked in, his voice stern but not harsh. Quote, "Who is Nguyen Van Two?" No one answered. Two hung his head, while Mrs. Tho immediately rushed to shield her son. Quote, "Officers, let's talk this over. He only borrowed money, he didn't kill anyone or rob anyone." The officer looked at her and replied calmly, "We received a report regarding the use of suspected forged documents to borrow assets. We invite Mr. Two to cooperate for verification." Mai Kai stood frozen, muttering to herself. "Only married for a week, it's only been a week. I heard that and didn't know whether to pity her or be angry." A week ago, she wore a wedding dress and smiled brightly, thinking she had stepped through the door to a new life. A week later, her husband was being summoned for work because of debt papers and fake signatures. Two suddenly dropped to his knees in front of Duck. That action left everyone stunned. He crawled forward to grab his brother's pant leg, his voice cracking. "Big brother, save me. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Please, tell them something. Tell them these documents are just a misunderstanding. Save me just this last time." Duck stood still. I saw his hands clenched so tightly they were trembling. He looked down at his younger brother, a man over 30, recently married, yet when trouble hits, he still only knows how to kneel and beg for someone else to take the fall. Mrs. Tho was also sobbing uncontrollably. "Duck, just say one word. If you say the family won't press charges, they'll surely go easy on him." Duck closed his eyes. Those few seconds felt suffocatingly long. I knew he was being torn apart. On one side is his own brother and his crying mother. On the other is the truth, his wife and child, the people swindled out of their money, and the boundaries he struggled so hard to build. Finally, Duck opened his eyes and leaned down to remove Two's hand from his pant leg. "I will not lie to save you." Two snapped his head up, his face twisted in disbelief. "Can you really bear to watch me go to prison?" Duck replied in a hoarse but firm voice, I can bear to watch you take responsibility for your actions." That statement made the whole yard fall silent. A police officer stepped forward and asked Tu to come with them for questioning. Tu turned to look at Mrs. Tho, then at Mai Kai. No one could save him now. Mai Kai stepped back as if afraid of being implicated. Mrs. Tho collapsed, calling out her son's name between broken sobs. Before walking out the gate, Tu turned to look at Duck one last time. His eyes were full of resentment, pleading, and fear, but Duck did not flinch. He looked straight at his brother as if to say he understood this wasn't an act of abandonment. This is the overdue price for all the times he was forgiven too easily. The car waiting for Tu drove away, kicking up a cloud of dust in front of the gate. Mrs. Tho fainted amid the panicked cries of the neighbors. I rushed over with Duck to support her and called a car to take her to the hospital. No matter how angry we were, we couldn't just leave her lying there in the yard. While everyone was in chaos, my phone buzzed. It was a message from the lawyer Duck had asked to review the old records. The content was just a short note, but it made my heart race. Quote, "Han, besides Tu's debts, I discovered an old transaction involving the family's ancestral land. The person who signed the transfer was Mrs. Tho." I stood frozen in the middle of the yard. So, it didn't end with Tu. Behind all the lies today lies an even older, deeper secret that could cause this whole family to collapse once more. The lawyer's message left me speechless for several seconds. The yard was still full of people, the neighbors whispering, Mai Kai sobbing inside the house, and Duck calling a car to take Mrs. Tho to the hospital. Yet in that moment, all I could hear clearly was my own heartbeat. An old transaction involving the ancestral land. The signer was Mrs. Tho. It was just a brief line, but it felt as if someone had pried open a box buried for years. I didn't tell Duck immediately. At that moment, Mrs. Tho had just fainted, her face pale, her breathing weak from the shock. Even though I was still filled with resentment, I still helped my husband lift her into the car. Duck sat in the back holding his mother, while I sat in the front, my hand still clutching the phone. Through the rearview mirror, I saw how heavy Duke's face looked. In just one afternoon, he had to watch his younger brother being taken away and see his mother collapse right at their own front gate. I knew that no matter how tough he was, that pain couldn't be light. Upon reaching the hospital, the doctor said Mrs. Tho only had low blood pressure from extreme stress and needed to be monitored for a while. When she was taken to the infusion room, only then did Duck sit down on the bench in the hallway. He hung his head, his hands clasped together, in a terrifying silence. I sat beside him for a long time before handing him the phone. Quote, "Take a look at this." After reading it, his expression changed noticeably, not with a burst of anger, but with a kind of deeply suppressed pain. He looked at me, his voice hoarse. Quote, "The ancestral land." I nodded. The lawyer said there was an old transaction, and the signer was Mom. Duck stood up abruptly, walked a few steps, then stopped. He turned toward the glass window at the end of the hall, where the afternoon light cast a pale glow on the tiles. I know he is trying to recall that ancestral plot. It's a small piece of land back home with an old house and the family altar. Ever since my father-in-law passed away, Duck would occasionally mention wanting to fix it up so relatives have a place to offer incense on death anniversaries. But in recent years, Mrs. Tho has always made excuses about legal issues, saying it's easier if she keeps the documents. Duck said in a low voice that he had asked his mother several times, and she always claimed the papers were still back home and she'd get them when she had time. I didn't know how to comfort him, because the more I heard, the more I understood this wasn't just a simple mistake of signing the wrong paper. It was a deliberately hidden secret. And if what the lawyer said is true, that the money from the land might have been used to pay off Tu's first debts, then everything started long before Mai Kai appeared. That evening, after Mrs. Tho woke up, Duck didn't ask her right away. He still poured water, ordered hot porridge, and scolded the nurse to notify him if his mother felt dizzy. It was that quiet care that made me love my husband even more. He isn't heartless. He's just someone pushed to the point of learning to set boundaries, but with his mother, he still cannot turn his back coldly. Near 9 p.m., the hospital room quieted down. Mai Kai had left for her parents' home after a fight with Tu over the phone. Tu was still at his workplace with the authorities. Only I, Duck, and Mrs. Tho were left in the small room smelling of mild antiseptic. Mrs. Tho lay on her side, eyes staring fixedly at the ceiling as if she already knew what was coming. Duck pulled a chair to the bedside, his voice very calm. Quote, Mom, I need to ask you something. You have to answer truthfully. Mrs. Tho turned to look at him, her lips dry, her voice noticeably weak. What is it? Duck placed the copy of the documents the lawyer had sent, temporarily printed at the hospital service desk, on the small table by the bed. He didn't push it in her face, just placed it there very gently. Quote, the ancestral land back home. You sold it, didn't you? Mrs. Tho closed her eyes. That was her only reaction. I already knew the answer. Duck knew it too. He sat up straight, his hands on his knees, but his fingers were clenched tight. Quote, Mom, answer me. After a long while, Mrs. Tho finally burst into tears. She didn't wail as loudly as she had out in the yard earlier. This time, her sobs came out in fragments, weary and broken. I didn't intend to hide it from you forever. Back then, Tu was being pressured so hard by those people. They threatened to beat him and make a scene back home. I was afraid your father wouldn't be able to rest in peace. I thought I'd sell it temporarily, and buy it back later when I had the money. Duck gave a faint smile, but his eyes turned red. How could you think of selling the ancestral land even temporarily? Mrs. Tho let out a sob. I know I was wrong, but at that moment, I only thought of how to save your brother. Duck stood up, his voice trembling with pain. So you saved Tu with Dad's land, then with my money, and today you plan to save him with my house. Have you ever thought that the more you save him, the more you ruin him? Mrs. Tho covered her face, sobbing silently. I stood nearby, my heart also feeling heavy. For the first time, I clearly saw the source of all the tragedies in this family. It didn't just lie in Tu's greed or Mai Chi's pragmatism. It started with a mother's misguided love. She loved her youngest son so much that she was willing to sacrifice fairness, ancestral property, and the life of her eldest son, ultimately driving the child she loved most into legal trouble. Duck looked at his mother and said slowly, Mom, I don't blame you for loving Tu, but loving him isn't about covering up his mistakes. And loving him certainly doesn't mean making others pay the price for him. Mrs. Tho lowered her hands from her face, looking at Duck with tear-filled eyes. What should I do now, son? Duck was silent for a long time, then he sat back down, his voice lower. For now, you must tell the lawyer the truth. Who was the land sold to, and where did the money go? How are the documents handled? Just tell them whatever you remember. I'm not bringing this up to shame you, but if you keep hiding it, it will only drag more innocent people into this. I gently added. Mom, at this point, trying to save face with lies only makes everything heavier. Mrs. Tho looked at me, and for the first time, there was no judgment or annoyance in her eyes, only exhaustion and regret. She nodded very slowly. I will tell you everything. That night, leaving the hospital, Duck and I walked down the hallway for a long time in silence. Outside, the city lights were on, and traffic flowed as if no storm had ever crashed down upon our family. Duck held my hand. His palm was cold, yet his grip was firm. He whispered, Han, I'm sorry. For years, I thought that staying silent would keep the family together. I looked at him, my heart sinking. It's all right, dear, we still have time to save the things that truly matter. Duck turned to me, his eyes held pain, but also a newfound clarity. I knew from that moment on, he was no longer just dealing with the house, the debts, or the paperwork. He was facing the roots of a family that had been misaligned for too long. And the hardest part wasn't pointing out who was at fault. The hardest part was how to speak the truth without letting human compassion be completely extinguished. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual, having barely slept all night. In my mind, I kept replaying the image of Mrs. Tho on her hospital bed, her voice choking as she admitted to selling the ancestral land to save Tu. Some truths are easier to handle with anger when you don't know them, but once revealed, they are not just infuriating, they are heartbreaking. Duck sat at the dining table with a cup of cold coffee in front of him. He hadn't touched his breakfast. I placed my hand on his shoulder and said softly, Please eat something, we have so much to do today. Duck looked up at me, his eyes red from lack of sleep. I keep thinking that if I had been firmer from the start, maybe Tu wouldn't have ended up like this. I sat down across from my husband and spoke slowly. No one can live someone else's life for them. Helping family is right, but if you help to the point where they forget how to take responsibility, that help is no longer a rescue. Duck remained silent for a long time before nodding. I knew he understood, but understanding with your head and accepting it with your heart are two very different things. Around 9 o'clock, lawyer and Fuck arrived at the house. He was the one who had been assisting us with the house sale and reviewing our documents from the beginning. This time, he was carrying a folder that was much thicker than yesterday's. He put it down on the table, pushed his glasses up the bridge of his nose, and said, "There are currently two paths for Two's situation. One is for the family to wash their hands of it and let everything follow the formal complaint, and the second is to actively cooperate, provide real documents, prove that you and Han are not involved, and simultaneously urge Two to confess honestly so his attitude toward making amends can be considered." Duck asked immediately, "Making amends means we have to pay his debts for him?" Fuck shook his head. "No, making amends does not necessarily mean you two have to shoulder everything. You can provide legal support, help list the creditors, determine which debts have valid paperwork, which show signs of usury, and which ones Two used forged documents to borrow for. Two's portion of responsibility remains Two's." I looked at Duck. "That is also what I want. We do not want to push Two into an abyss, but we certainly cannot pour our family's money into that bottomless pit again." Duck stood up, grabbed his jacket, and said, "Let's go." He wanted to see Two. I went with my husband. On the way, I called Mrs. Tho at the hospital, telling her to eat her porridge and not to leave her room on her own. She answered the phone, her voice noticeably weak. Quote, "Is Duck very angry with me?" I paused for a beat and replied, "He is in more pain than he is angry. Rest now, Mom. Whatever needs to be said, we'll talk about later." Mrs. Tho on the other end of the line began to sob very softly. This time, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt weary in my heart. When a family reaches this point, no one truly wins. When we met Two, he was sitting in a small office, his shirt wrinkled, his hair matted, and his eyes sunken and dark. As soon as he saw Duck, he immediately jumped up. I thought he would cry and beg like yesterday, but no, he just bowed his head, his voice raspy. Quote, "Brother, Sister Han, I'm sorry." Duck did not answer immediately. He pulled out a chair to sit down and placed a folder in front of Two. "I'm bringing a lawyer, not to cover up your crimes, I want to make that clear beforehand." Two nodded repeatedly. I already know." Duck looked straight at his younger brother. "I'm helping you because you're my brother, but I won't lie, I won't take on your debts, I won't doctor files, and I won't pay anyone off to let this slide. Whatever you've done, declare exactly that. List every single debt you have. Be clear about who you forged documents with. Be clear about who pressured you, who lured you in, and who gave you predatory loans." Hearing that, Two's face turned pale. "If I confess everything, I'm sure I won't be able to get out of this." Duck replied very slowly. "Getting out doesn't mean suffering no consequences. Getting out means that after this, you still have a chance to start over as a decent person." That sentence made Two burst into tears. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking in waves. I looked at him, no longer feeling the intense anger I felt yesterday. I still haven't forgotten what he did, but seeing a man over 30 sitting there crying because he's facing the consequences of his life for the first time, I just feel sad. Fuck began asking about each debt one by one. Two was hesitant at first, but gradually he started to disclose things more clearly. He owed Mr. Kai, Ms. Van, 2 old friends, and a group of outside lenders with very high interest rates. Some he borrowed to pay off previous debts, some to host a fancy wedding, and some just to save face with Mai Kai, fearing she would leave if she knew he was broke. I couldn't help but ask Two, "Did you ever think about what would happen to our daughter if those forged documents dragged us into this?" Two bowed his head low. "I didn't think that far ahead. At the time, I was just terrified of being hounded for money." Duck closed his eyes. Perhaps that answer was more painful than any excuse, as it showed that Two wasn't inherently evil to the core, but selfish, cowardly, and used to living without thinking of consequences. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. Before leaving, Duck placed his hand on Two's shoulder. "If you cooperate properly, I will hire a lawyer to protect your legal rights. But remember, from today on, no one will follow behind you to clean up your mess anymore." Two nodded, his tears falling onto the back of his hand. "I understand." Leaving the room, Duck and I stood in the hallway for a moment. He let out a very long sigh, as if he had just put down a heavy rock but was still aching all over. I gently held his hand. He was doing the right thing. We aren't abandoning him, but we won't cover for him either. Duck looked at me, his gaze softening. Quote, "Thank you. Without you, I probably would have been soft-hearted the wrong way again." I shook my head. "It wasn't me pulling you back. You saw it yourself." That afternoon, we began calling each creditor on the list. Duck made it very clear that we would not act as guarantors or take on the debt, but we were willing to help verify the forged documents and support Tu in creating a repayment plan within his earning capacity. Some cursed at us, some threatened to sue, and some softened their tone after listening. An older person said over the phone, "At least you two are stepping up to talk properly. That guy too has been hiding from us for months." That evening when we returned to the hospital, Mrs. Tho burst into tears upon seeing Duck. She asked tremblingly, "Can you save your brother?" Duck pulled up a chair next to her and said very slowly, "I am helping him take responsibility. That is the only way left to save him." Mrs. Tho sat in silence. A moment later, she nodded, tears rolling down her wrinkled eyes. Quote, "I understand now. If only I had understood that sooner." I stood by the door, watching the two of them. For the first time in many years, I saw Mrs. Tho no longer trying to keep up appearances. She was just a mother who finally realized that love, if misplaced or handled wrongly, could turn into a knife that cuts the very person she loves most. I kept thinking that after Tu was brought in for questioning, and after the debts and forged papers were exposed, Mai Kai would understand that this was no longer a wealthy charade she could keep playing. But I was wrong. There are people who, when they wake from a dream, their first instinct is not to reflect on themselves but to hurriedly find another dream to cling to. 3 days later, after Mrs. Tho had been temporarily discharged to rest in her old room, Mai Kai unexpectedly came to see me. That day, Duck went with Lawyer Fuck to supplement the paperwork for Tu. Only my daughter and I were at home. I had just finished hanging up the clothes when the doorbell rang. Looking through the camera lens, I saw Mai Kai standing outside the gate, hair tied low, no makeup, holding a small bag of fruit. I opened the gate but didn't invite her inside right away. "Who are you looking for?" Mai Kai lowered her head, her voice much quieter than usual. "I'm looking for you. I want to talk to you for a bit." If it were before, I probably would have refused immediately. But seeing her haggard appearance, I still opened the door. I didn't want to be so narrow-minded that I'd turn my back on someone in distress. But I am also no longer as naive as I once was. I invited Mai Kai to sit at the patio table outside, where everything is open and visible. Mai Kai placed the bag of fruit on the table, her eyes red. "Sister Han, I apologize for the other day. I was tricked by Tu and his mother. I had just married into the family, so I believed whatever I was told. I didn't know the house actually belonged to you and your husband." I poured her a glass of water, not rushing to reply. Apologies like this might sound pitiful if you hear them in passing. But after everything, I know to look at what people do after the apology, not just the trembling in their voice. I said, "I understand that you were partially deceived. But nobody forced you to say those things to me and Lil Lin that day." Mai Kai hung her head, tears falling. "I know I was too harsh that day. I just thought if I didn't speak up, you wouldn't leave. And then my husband and I would have nothing left." I looked at her. That sounded sincere, but it also revealed one thing. What she hurts most about is having nothing left, not that she insulted others. A moment later, Mai Kai hesitantly asked, "Sister Han, if I divorce Tu, do you think I'm wrong?" I was a bit surprised, but not entirely shocked. It's easy to understand why a marriage built on lies falls apart so quickly. I replied, "That's your decision, but if you leave just because Tu no longer has a house, then you understand your own heart." Mai Kai bit her lip. She was silent for a few seconds then suddenly looked up. "I know I'm practical, but what woman doesn't want to marry to have an easier life? I came from the countryside to work as a sales clerk for a few million a month, renting a cramped room. Seeing my friends marry wealthy men, I felt insecure. When Tu said this house would be ours after the wedding, I truly believed my life would change. I don't deny that sense of insecurity. A poor woman's life is often unstable, but poverty is no excuse to trample on others. Wanting to change your life doesn't give you the right to take what isn't yours." I said slowly, "Wanting a better life is not wrong. What's wrong is wanting a better life by taking from others." Mai Kai lowered her head, twisting her hands together. I thought that was enough, but to my surprise, she continued in a hesitant voice. Quote, Ms. Han, if I'm not with two anymore, could you ask Mr. Duck to give me a job? I heard your furniture workshop is expanding. I could work in the office, assist customers, or do anything. I stared at her without answering, and seeing my silence, Mai Kai hurriedly added, I don't need a high salary, just somewhere stable. Besides, if Mom needs someone to look after her later, I can come over to help you. I'm young, healthy, and agile. Your new house is so large, you surely need someone to manage it. At this point, I understood that all the apologies, tears, and that small bag of fruit were just the beginning. What Mai Kai really wanted was not forgiveness. She was looking for a way to latch onto another situation. When two was no longer of value, she immediately turned to Duke's workshop, our new house, and even caring for Mom as a ticket to remain in our circle of benefits. I set my glass down on the table. Kai, you can go find a job. But don't find one by exploiting other people's pity. Mai Kai turned pale. You're thinking too poorly of me. I just want to start over. I looked her straight in the eye. To start over, you begin by standing on your own 2 feet, not by asking if someone else's house has room for you to squeeze in. Right then, a soft cough sounded behind us. I turned around and saw Mrs. Tho standing at the door. I had no idea how long she had been listening. Her expression was hard to describe. Exhausted, disappointed, as if someone had just slapped away her last shred of hope. Mai Kai jumped to her feet when she saw her. Quote, Mom, I was just talking to Han. Mrs. Tho stared at her for a long time. The woman who once defended her youngest daughter-in-law blindly, and used her as an excuse to kick my husband and me out of the house. Now, it seemed she finally saw the person she had trusted for what she really was. In a hoarse voice, she said, Don't call me Mom anymore. Mai Kai froze. Mrs. Tho stepped slowly out into the yard, her hand resting on the door frame. She didn't shout, but every word landed with crystal clarity. Quote, My son was wrong, I admit it. I was wrong too, I admit that as well. But you, just a week after the wedding, were already looking for bigger houses and better people to cling to. You don't love anyone, you only care about yourself. Mai Kai flushed, her feigned gentleness vanishing. She snapped back, quote, So, you think you're so noble? Didn't you promise me a house just to get me to marry your son? Now that your son has nothing left, you turn around and call me materialistic. Everyone has to look out for themselves. That sentence made Mrs. Tho stand still. I saw her eyes well up, but this time not to play the victim. Perhaps she was pained by being exposed by the very person she had used to save face. A moment later, she pointed toward the gate. Leave. Whatever business you and two have, resolve it between yourselves. Don't come here sniffing around his brother's property anymore. Mai Kai looked at me and then at Mrs. Tho. Realizing there was no way to turn things around, she grabbed her bag and stood up abruptly, leaving the bag of fruit on the table. Before leaving, she gave a cold laugh. Fine. This house is sold anyway, I don't care. I watched Mai Chi's shadow disappear behind the gate. I felt no satisfaction, only sadness for someone so young who believed that life could only be improved by clinging to the assets of others. Mrs. Tho sat down on the stone bench, her shoulders slumping. After a long silence, she whispered, Han, I judged the wrong person. I didn't answer immediately. The afternoon breeze swept through the yard, making a few dry leaves roll softly under my feet. I spoke softly, It's not just about looking at who is wrong, Mother. We also have to reflect on how we taught others to believe in what's wrong. Mrs. Tho lowered her head, silent for the first time in response to my words. After that afternoon when Mai Kai left, the old house suddenly felt unusually quiet. There was no longer the sound of her boasting in the living room, no sound of two pacing in the yard, nor my mother-in-law calling out from the kitchen, ordering this person to get that or that person to clean this. Everything returned to silence, but it was not peace. It was the quiet of a house that had just endured too much heartbreak. Mrs. Tho sat for a very long time on the stone bench in the yard. Ever since Mai Kai left, she hadn't said a single word. I went to the kitchen to cook porridge, intentionally giving her some time alone. When I brought the bowl of porridge out, she was still sitting there, staring at the patch of yard where Mai Kai had stood just days ago, blocking the door and demanding to drive us away. I placed the bowl of porridge on the table. Quote, "Please, have something to eat, mother. The doctor told you not to skip meals." Mrs. Tho looked up at me, her eyes no longer filled with that scrutinizing gaze from before. They were tired, dull, and full of late-coming regret. "Han, I apologize to you." I stood frozen. That apology, if it were a few years ago, I surely would have hoped to hear it until I cried. But today, when it was finally spoken, my heart didn't feel relieved right away. There are wounds that one apology cannot heal, but at least it is the beginning of an admitted truth. I pulled up a chair and sat down opposite her. "What are you apologizing to me for?" Mrs. Tho bowed her head, her aged hands resting on her knees, trembling slightly. "Because I took your hard work for granted. Because I thought that as a daughter-in-law, you had to endure it. Because I defended Tu, and even defended Maikai, letting her stand at your door and say such hurtful things." I didn't answer. She continued, her voice even more choked up. "I know it's too late to say this now, but over these last few days, I've thought it all over. Since the day you moved here, you have never mistreated me. When my back ached, you bought medicine. When I invited relatives over, you cooked for them. No matter what you said, I held my tongue. Yet you thought my silence meant I was weak." I looked at her, my heart heavy. For the first time, she called things by their true names. No avoiding it. No blaming circumstances, no using old age as a shield. That afternoon, Duck returned with Lawyer Fuck. Stepping into the yard, he froze when he saw his mother sitting there. Mrs. Tho slowly stood up and went into her room. A moment later, she came out with an old brown cloth bag. I had seen her keep that bag carefully in her closet, always locked whenever she left the room. She placed the bag on the table in front of Duck. "These are the documents I have kept. There are land sale papers for Hua, receipts for Tu's debts, and even the times you sent me money that I never told anyone about." Duck looked at the bag but didn't open it right away. "Why are you giving this to me?" Mrs. Tho shed tears. "I don't want to hide it anymore. I also don't want anyone to call you unfilial later, or say that you and your wife abandoned your mother. Everything you've done, I had to keep to remind myself how much I owe you." Duck sat down, opened the bag, and took out each paper. Old, yellowed receipts, bank transfer slips from years ago, Tu's handwritten IOUs, and below them, Mrs. Tho's shaky signature as the person who stepped in to plead for more time. I looked at my husband and saw his lips pressed tight. He wasn't crying, but his eyes were red. Mrs. Tho suddenly turned to me. "Han, I owe you too. Not just money, I owe you justice." I choked up. A woman who once used her status as a mother-in-law to pressure her daughter-in-law was now bowing her head to speak of justice. That scene softened my heart, but it didn't mean everything could go back to the way it was. Duck was silent for a long time, then asked, "Do you really want to change?" Mrs. Tho nodded immediately, tears falling. "Yes, I don't want to live the old way anymore. I'm tired, and I don't want to hurt you anymore either." Duck looked at his mother, his voice dropping. "Mother, listen to me. Han and I will still be moving into the new house, but for now, you won't be living there with us." Mrs. Tho froze, and I turned to look at my husband. Duck continued very slowly, as if afraid each word would hurt her, yet he had to be clear. "I will rent a small apartment for you near where Tu will be working, and I'll cover the rent for the time being. But you must live on your own, manage your own living expenses, and learn not to interfere in my household or use your status as my mother to make decisions for me anymore." Mrs. Tho's voice trembled. "You aren't letting me live with you because you're angry at me, right?" Duck shook his head. "No, if I were angry, I would have just ignored you. I'm doing this because you need to learn to live without relying on others' endurance. I also need to protect my wife. A new life cannot begin with the same old habits." That statement left Mrs. Tho silent. She looked at me and then at Duck, as if finally understanding this wasn't a punishment. It was a boundary, a late but necessary boundary. I added gently, "Mother, living apart for a while doesn't mean cutting ties. You can come over for meals on weekends, and little Lynn will still visit you, but we must relearn how to love each other properly. Simply living under the same roof doesn't guarantee a peaceful family." Mrs. Tho burst into tears. This time she didn't beg or cry out, she just nodded very slowly. I understand, I will try. I won't promise to be perfect, but I won't force you two to carry me anymore. Duck leaned down to gather the papers and then placed his hand on his mother's shoulder. You still have me, but from today on, you must also have yourself. That sentence stayed with me for a very long time, because sometimes the elderly are not frightening because they are weak, but because they are used to using that weakness to control their children. True love isn't doing everything for them, but helping them stand back up. Even if it's slow, even if it's hard, but on their own 2 feet. That evening, for the first time in many years, the family meal consisted of only 4 people. Me, Duck, our daughter, and Mrs. Tho. No one mentioned my Kai, and no one brought up Tu's debt. Mrs. Tho ate very slowly, occasionally picking up a piece of egg for little Lin, then shyly pulling her chopsticks back as if afraid she had done something wrong. The little girl looked at her and asked in a low voice, Grandma, will you still scold my mom in the future? The whole table went silent. Mrs. Tho set her bowl down, tears welling up in her eyes again. She patted her granddaughter's head, her voice trembling. Quote, No, Grandma was wrong. From now on, I will treat both of you with love and care. I lowered my head, trying to hide my stinging eyes. Everything might not heal right away, but at least in this house that was about to be handed over, a heartfelt word was finally spoken. The day to hand over the old house came faster than I expected. That morning, I woke up very early while the air was still misty. The yard in front of the house, where I used to hang clothes, where little Lin practiced riding her bike, and where we shared countless family meals, now only had a few cardboard boxes neatly stacked against the wall. The once familiar house suddenly felt strangely empty. I stood in the middle of the living room looking around. Everything had almost been moved out, leaving only the early sunlight streaming through the window, casting long streaks of light across the tiled floor. There are places we once thought we would be attached to for a lifetime, yet when the time comes to leave, what lingers most is not the regret of losing property, but the memories that once lived there. Duck stepped up beside me. Are you sad? I smiled. Yes, but not because of losing the house. Duck understood and didn't ask any further. Over the past few days, things have gradually been resolved. Tu confessed sincerely and cooperated with the lawyers and those involved. Because he had no prior criminal record and proactively addressed the consequences as best he could, things did not turn out for the worst. Of course, he still has to pay the price for what he caused. But at least it is a price that helps him understand that in life, he cannot forever rely on others to carry the weight of his responsibilities. My Kai filed for divorce just over a month after the wedding. Before leaving, she didn't return to look for us even once. I heard she returned to her hometown and started over at a shop near her house. I don't know what her life will be like from now on, but I hope that after everything, she understands that a stable life cannot be built upon other people's homes. As for Mrs. Tho, she moved into the small apartment that Duck helped her with. In the first few days, she cried a lot. She said she had never lived alone, never had to go to the market herself, pay the utility bills, or decide everything without someone by her side. But then, little by little, she gradually got used to it. Every weekend she brings some vegetables or fruit to visit her grandchild, with no more orders, no more reproaches, and no more phone calls forcing Duck to take care of Tu at any cost. Once, I saw her sitting and playing with little Lin in the yard, laughing while telling stories about the past. That moment made me realize that sometimes distance doesn't drive people apart, it just gives each person enough space to look back at themselves. At noon on the day we handed over the house, Mr. Kai came to receive the keys. All the procedures went by very quickly. After signing the papers, Duck stood silently for a few seconds in front of the gate. I knew he was missing his father. If my father-in-law were still alive, he would probably be sad to see the family go through such things. But I also believe he would be relieved to see that, in the end, his children dared to face the truth instead of continuing to hide it. Duck closed the gate for the last time. The sound of the lock was very faint, but I knew it was also the moment a chapter of the past had truly closed. That afternoon, we moved into the new house. Little Lin ran all over the yard, admiring the flower tree by the gate before running inside to see the bedrooms. She chirped with laughter the whole time. Children's laughter made the house, which felt brand new, become so much warmer. Mrs. Tho also came over to visit. She stood for a long time in front of the ground floor room that Duck had once prepared for her. The room was still there, but now it no longer carried the meaning of an expected arrangement. It was a door that was always open, but the person who entered had to know how to cherish it. She turned to look at Duck. "You kept this room?" Duck nodded. "Yes." She lowered her head for a long time before saying, "I don't deserve it." Duck smiled. "It's not about being worthy or not, it's just that we understand each other better now." Hearing that, her eyes turned red. In the evening, the whole family sat down for the first meal in the new house. There were no delicacies, just a few simple dishes, but throughout the meal, I felt a sense of relief I had never known before. No one was competing, no one was calculating, and no one was using family ties to coerce others. Everyone just sat there eating together like a real family. At one point, I looked at Duck. He was picking out food for our daughter. His face looked much more peaceful than in the days past. I suddenly remembered that morning when my Kai stood blocking the door and said, "This house is mine now, get out." At the time, I was very angry, but looking back now, I don't feel angry anymore. Because without that incident, we might have never clearly seen the cracks that had quietly existed in the family for years. There are painful truths, but once brought to light, they become opportunities for everything to heal. Night fell, and I walked out to the backyard alone. A cool breeze blew through the young trees, and in the distance, the city lights twinkled like tiny stars. I suddenly realized something very simple. Family is not a place where people can thoughtlessly demand things from each other forever. Family is also not a place where whoever sacrifices the most wins. Family is where everyone learns to love while still respecting each other's boundaries, a place to help one another stand up, not to live each other's lives. I turned back into the house, and through the glowing glass window, I saw Duck laughing with our daughter. I saw Miss Tho sitting nearby, slowly peeling an orange segment by segment. Such an ordinary scene. But sometimes, after so much turmoil, that ordinary life is the most precious thing of all. And I know the journey ahead for each of us is still long. Tu still has to pay off debts, and Miss Tho still has to learn how to live differently. We also still have many things to strive for. But at least from today on, no one is living in lies anymore. That is enough. Because sometimes happiness isn't about getting a bigger house, but when the people living in that house finally learn to treat each other with kindness.